Hello there, James here from Cobra Engineering. Today we're going to install the coolant crossover delete on my very own car here. I've owned this since it was new in 2004. I'm going to jump right in, work on the engine first, and at the end of the video I'll break everything down on the table and show you some of the components. But before we get started, I'm going to show you some of the new merch. Look at that. We all know push rods suck. You get the sticker too. Of course, you got the classic Cobra Engineering sticker. You can get all this and hoodies at cobratechtalk.com. But right now, let's jump right in and have a little fun and make a big mess. All right, we'll start on the bottom of the car underneath. This is the right-hand side of the passenger side on the lower side of the radiator. There's basically a plastic screw. It's like a cap. You just use a large flathead screwdriver and you back that off. Be careful if you haven't had yours out before. It gets snug and it's just plastic. You can break them. But it backs off, as you see, quite a few turns before anything happens. It's not magically just going to pop out like a drain plug on an oil pan. It kind of catches itself. It'll just start trickling out. And that trickle, if you got a lot of time, is fine. But you make sure you got a big pan under there, a sheet of cardboard to catch the mess, because there's no nice way to do it. So now if you had some time to kill, you walk away and let that run, but I don't. So I'm going to crack her open here and make a nice big mess. Catch it with my hand so it doesn't spray all over the camera. Most of it's getting in the pan down there and down my arm. But you get the gist of it. Now you don't have to drain all of the coolant out. You just got to get the, good couple inches out of the top of the radiator, enough to empty the degas tank. So I'm going to fast forward this now. You get the gist. When I'm done with this, I just tighten that up again, and then we'll move to the top side of the vehicle. Now we got that pesky tank out of the way. We're going to move on to removing the steel tube crossover. Here you can see my friend Dan stopped by for some work on his nearly bone stock 03 Cobra, so I took the opportunity to shoot a little video of what it looks like. If you didn't modify anything, 18, 19 years, it looks really sharp. But essentially the same, even though I've already modified mine and removed the bypass. I have a thermostat housing up there. I don't even remember who makes that one. I believe it was Canton. You could see here I got a hose running up from my cooling mod in the back. Instead of feeding it back through the heater core, I feed it right up to the upper radiator hose. I'm going to be able to do that again with the new Cobra Engineering thermostat housing. There's an extra port on the back that I'm going to run that into. Here you can see I'm struggling to break that hose. This has been on here, I can't even tell you, maybe 12 years. Now down here, you got two 8mm bolts. Go right into the heads. Straight down, you'll see. It's right next to where the tube goes in the head. But don't forget, on the front of the heads, there's two 13mm nuts that are on studs that also support this crossover. As you can see here, in a minute I'm going to grab a wrench and loosen those up. You can also see I have the stainless steel plug up there. If you're going to keep that steel crossover, you definitely need to get one of those. But you don't have to take these nuts all the way off, because luckily the brackets to the crossover pipe are slotted, so they don't have to come straight forward. They just go up off of there. Now you get in there and you're going to try to pop that out. And as you're going to see here, this is no gimme. This is some wiggle that's been in there for, like I said, probably 12 years at least. So I'm going to just get me a pry bar. Use a rag, towel, or whatever you got. Kind of insulate your nice stuff so you don't ruin it. Try to pry straight up if you can. Make sure you're not prying on any sensors or any wires or hoses. Just straight on the valve cover, or hopefully the head. You can see that one's moving. It's still quite a struggle. I worked on this for a while until I finally got it free. I'm really struggling here. This driver's side just did not want to come free. Wiggle around. I'm going to try loosening this other clamp, like that's going to make a difference. I don't know what I was thinking. And I finally came to the conclusion that that auxiliary idler was really inhibiting how much that moved. So I had to take the belt off. Off comes the blower belt. Nothing new here. You've all done this. You know your engine better than I do. How you get that off. Half-inch strong arm would have did a better job than that ratchet, but I grabbed what I had handy. You see my auxiliary idler on this custom setup sits really tight on there. So this is a billet flow, so it hasn't been off in, who knows, 15-20 years. And so I popped that thing off, and that gave me a lot more wiggle room. Now I can get that stupid thing loose. And then, as you'll see, as soon as I figured out I got it loose, I forgot about the temperature sender. You see the wire stretching there like a dummy. Don't do that. That's not good. That's hard on your old wiring. You see I'm pointing out my stupidity. Pop that off. And bam. It's gone. That thing was surprisingly rusty considering I had it all custom made and powder coated, and he did a good job when he did it. So it's not that. It's steel. And I use this car. I don't just sit on it and look at it. So I was going to take this temperature sender out here and reuse it, and you certainly can. Just put a little Teflon on there. I like the dope better than the tape. It's a 3/4 inch wrench usually. But eventually here I gave up. And I realized, you know, I'm working on another Cobra. I got a brand new one sitting in the box. I'm going to use that one. Meanwhile, grab the drill. I got a brush on there. Going to clean out those holes nice. Cleaner and the smoother those holes are, the better. Get in there with some Scotch-Brite, 400 grit, whatever you can. These look really nice. Come back, inspect everything. Now you can see I got the fittings. Here's the passenger side fitting. I've already installed that ORB to AN fitting before I start this. I'm just putting a little tape over the end of those AN ends so they don't get dinged up and ruined, because that's the seal. I got a little grease going on the O-ring. You know my mantra there. You gotta grease the O-rings. You do not want to try to be a hero and tear those. Here you can see. I'm going to grease the bores also. It's really not such thing as too much. And we're going to try to install these. These go in. Oh, first you can see I got the 3/8 plug on the passenger side. I'm not using that port. There's a little pipe dope on there. I installed that pretty snug. You don't have to kill it, but same thing here. That's a brand new temp sensor installed. Just drop those in. And you're going to want to put a rag on top and give it some good force. Here I'm removing the fill plug on top. And then we're just going to wiggle and push, wiggle and push. As you can see, it's not just sliding right in there. That's a good thing. You want these to seal. You don't want to deal with trickle leaks and stuff down in the valley, especially if you still got a cast iron block. It'll rust even more. We're going to make sure them bores were clean. Once they're in, got the supplied hardware I include. Those are M6 by 25 millimeter bolts with a 10 millimeter head on them. They are serrated on the back side, so they're not going to back off. No need for Loctite or anything. Careful not to drop those down in the valley. Of course, if you do, grab the stock bolt, throw it in there. Life will go on. Now remember, M6 bolts are only basically maybe 10 foot-pounds, so I usually just use a ratchet and snug them down. I don't pull out the torque wrench for something like this. This one's a little tricky under the blower, and this is only a 2.3 liter VMP here, so I'd imagine if you got a 3 liter Whipple or one of the older 3.4, that's really going to be hard to get at under there, but get some swivels in there. Again, it's just holding the head fitting from pushing out. This isn't like a structural bolt or anything. And you can see, here I am messing up again. I don't edit these things out. I show you because you're probably going to do the same thing. I forgot to put the plug on first, and it's so tight I can't get it on with that bolt in, so I end up having to remove that bolt entirely. And then all I had to do was turn the head fitting a little bit. I didn't actually have to remove the head fitting back out and start over. So you just give it a little turn. Plug that back in, turn it back, and throw the bolt back in again. Yay, working on cars, it's always this much fun. We all know it. We've all been there. Don't think that I'm any different than you. Run that down. Like I said, just grab a regular 3/8 ratchet, give it a snug. You see I'm not reaching all the way out at the end of the handle and trying to kill it. Just getting it snug. That ain't going anywhere. Now you just come in, peel that tape off of them AN fittings, and this is where you realize that you shouldn't have stuck it on so good. Just getting it on there is good enough. Install the 90-degree hose end. Now I took all the, I don't know what you'd call them, but the ends that screw the hose itself onto the hose ends off. And you can see I'm just putting the straight one here and the 90-degree one on the driver's side. There, I got those off of the hose ends, including on the thermostat housing here. They're just on there finger tight. I got the 90 in there for the cooling mod. Install that in the hose. Now that hose has already been cut short from my previous setup. That's not a stock length hose. Not a lot, maybe a couple inches. But here I'm trying to line up those two hose ends. You can see right there. It's not really working well. I'm fiddling around, trying to come up with a good plan. Because you want to measure your hose lengths, because these are -12. They're not going to have as much wiggle room as a smaller hose. What I ended up doing is fiddling around quite a bit with this until I had to kind of turn the housing and flip the hose ends on the thermostat housing itself to give myself a little more hose on that straight one. That straight one's going to a 90 on the housing, and the 90 on the driver's side is going to a 45 on the housing. Here I'll show you with a tape measure you could measure, but the problem of course is the tape's too straight. You get a ballpark idea, you could guess, and it'll probably be close. But ideally, I gave up and just get the holes in there right where it's going to be. Put your thumb where you need it, and there you go. Now here you can see I've got the hoses built. I'm not going to bore you with constructing the end hoses. I'm sure you've seen 100 videos and you figured that out on your own already. There's the one with the 90-degree end and a 45, and then the other one is the straight end and a 90-degree end. So now I'm just getting in here and doing the fiddly with the wrenches. This is about when I hit the point I realized, you know, maybe I should have just test fit the head fittings in without the O-rings. Figured all this out. Tighten the hose ends onto the fittings themselves and then press them down into the heads with the O-rings on. But hindsight's always 20/20, so here I am busting knuckles trying to figure out how to get a wrench on these things without banging them up, making them look like crap. I'm sure you all have great techniques. Why don't you put in the comments how I did everything wrong, because I'll admit it, I did everything wrong, but I got it. And eventually these tightened down, and eventually they sealed perfectly fine. Okay, now I got all the hoses on. I'm going to get the thermostat housing in there. And as you could tell, it'd have been a lot easier if I would have just removed the intercooler tank altogether and drained that. But on the other hand, I wouldn't have known how much room I had to work with. So it's kind of a win-lose situation. I should have removed that upper hose just so you guys could see better what's going on. But I wanted it there to know where my hose routing would work. I did end up having to remove the lower intercooler hose and reroute it to get around that straight line. And I'm sure you're going to have to do different things too, but it's what it takes to get everything to fit. And then here you could see I used the spring clamp on that cooling mod line that runs from the back. Also notice there's some sheeting on there to insulate from the heat. Okay, here you see the final install. I got a 90-degree fitting coming out of the driver's side head, tapering off to a 45-degree fitting into the thermostat housing. Then a straight hose fitting coming out of the passenger side head into a 90-degree fitting that goes to the thermostat housing. Of course, after this, I put the idler bracket back on, put the belt back on, make sure it cleared all the hoses well, it wasn't going to interfere with anything. But one last important thing, those two 13mm nuts that used to hold the solid tube crossover need to be snugged back up. You don't want those coming off and causing any trouble. Now we move on to fill procedure. The fill procedure is pretty straightforward. I use the transmission long filter in that driver's side head fitting with that plug removed. Remember, that's an O-ring port. You do not need to over tighten that plug when you put it back in. And I just fill between the degas tank and that port until the level looks good. I'll replace that driver's side plug port fitting before I start the car. But then once you run it through a heat cycle, Check it the next day, make sure that level's good. You can back that plug off a little and make sure coolant's coming out of there and everything looks full. So I got it backed out of the garage. I'm letting her get up the temperature. I like to use an infrared gun. I'm shooting everything. I'm making sure the thermostat opens. Just because it's brand new doesn't mean it works. You're going to check everything over, check the coolant. You can see I have the cap off so I can watch if any fluid's going down dramatically. Other than that, you see the other project Cobra in the background getting a whole lot done. I think we're going to move on to the table and we'll show you all the components separately. Alright, here you can see all the components that you're going to get. Essentially what you're going to get is these three pieces. This is going to be already assembled. There's a 1/2-inch plug in the back. I used that on the assembly you just seen. I put my cooling mod into there, but you could put some dope on there or some Teflon tape and seal that. Likewise, this plug you've seen I did dope up and seal. I didn't use that. That's extra. You could put a sensor, a pressure sensor there, whatever you need. This one is where you're putting the temperature sensor. This is also where you could burp the system on the top. You see it does not need to be torqued down, just snug. The O-ring will seal for you. Now, when you get this housing like this, if for some reason you ever had to take this apart, I got a sticker and it's marked with a permanent ink and a little bit on the inside of that bolt. That bolt does not come out. Reason being is when I send it, it's Loctited in right here. Now there's a hole on the other half that is not threaded. So the thermostat sits in there and it's on a little soft O-ring, just something so it doesn't slop around in there. So that goes together like that. There's only the 5 bolts are holding that together. There's a silicone O-ring on this side. That's what seals it. You can also see the 3 bypass holes built in. Also, you can see they bypass the thermostat there. No need to do anything with this thermostat. This is a 170. You can get a 160 or a 180. Also, 1.5-inch hose barb. That's what I use. That's the standard upper hose on a Terminator's radiator. But you could also get a number 20 AN or a number 16 AN, whichever one you'd rather have. Basically, you seen on the back, all I did was I installed number 12 ORB, straight ORB to AN fittings. They go, you can see these are a little beat up and old, but they go here, here, so you're going to need 4 of those. You've also seen that I used 4 different hose ends. I used 1 straight one, 2 90s, and a 45. And I ended up not using very much hose at all, maybe a foot total. But, you know, I had 6 feet because why would you want to come up short? Essentially, this is what you're getting right here. These 3 components is what you're going to get in the kit for now. Until I line up some kind of deal with a hose or a hose manufacturer. You've seen on the previous part of the video, I'm not going to say it was fun to install. I had some issues. You had to get everything in there. It's tight. But it's definitely something you can handle. I have a lot of confidence in it. You're going to be able to figure that out. So, I think that's about it. And with that, we're going to wrap up this video. And you're going to subscribe to the channel. And you maybe check out some other videos. Check out the website, cobraengineering.com. If you have any questions whatsoever, or any suggestions for other videos, james@cobratechtalk.com. cobratechtalk.com is where you can go to get any of the references from these videos. You could buy shirts, hoodies, stickers, you name it. Thanks for watching.